Hi my friends, and welcome to another exciting one. Today we are going to learn how to create a box packaging from scratch inside of Blender. We are going to start with the die lines, and then we move on to materials, shading and texture, and then we do our final render as usual. So without much talks, open up your Blender and let's get started. So as always, let's hit on general to start with our new blend file. So I'll select my cube and then my light, and then I'll hit on X to delete them from my scene. So before we start, I would like to show you something inside Illustrator. So this is the die line we are going to use. I'm going to leave a link in the description below in case you want to grab it and follow along. It's free of charge, so grab it and let's do it together. So it's a very simple die line. We have the main outline here, and then we have some lines showing where we are going to fold. So in case you're using your own box, you can unwrap your box and then duplicate it inside of Illustrator, and then make sure you save it as an SVG. So to save it as an SVG, control, and then you do save as, and then the type you change it to SVG. So once you're done with that, let's quickly go back to our Blender and then let's import our SVG. So to import our SVG, we have to go to File, Import, and then we go Scalable Vector Graphics, SVG, and then you locate where you saved your box SVG. I'll double click, and then I'll add it into my scene. So it's added into our scene. If I zoom in, you can see it's here. So I will drag to select everything, and then if you take a look here, you can see what we have. So everything is here as well. So let's just drag and make sure we've selected everything, and then we can hit on S to scale it up, just to make it easier for us to work with. So once you're done, you can, maybe if it's too big, you can scale it down once you are done with your unfolding and everything. Right, so once we scale it up, by default Blender always imports scalable vector graphics with some default shader, which is this black shader. So let's remove it. So let's select this, go to our shader editor, and then let's hit on this X here to remove that shader. Right, so once we remove it, you can see it's nice and beautiful. So next, let's make sure we have everything selected, and then let's rotate it RX on the X-axis 90 degrees like this. Right, so this is what we are going to use. So now if we turn on wireframe mode, you can see this is the wireframe that we have at the moment, but this is not what we want. We need to create something that we can work with, that can be easier for us to fold. Right, so this, if we go back into our solid shading mode, this object here is not a plane, but rather it's a curve. Right, so let's see how we can convert it into a plane and then make it easier for us to work with. Right, so if I go to curve data, we can see we have shape here, then we have 2D and then 3D. Right, so I'll turn on my wireframe mode for a second. So 2D and then 3D. So if we see the resolution here, that's what is creating the wireframe for us. And then I think the resolution is too much, so we can decrease it to, let's say, 3, and then we still be able to maintain our curves. So you see we still have our nice curve, but then if we go to something like 1, you can see we start to lose some of our curve, but that's not what we want. So we want to maintain this smooth curve, but then so I'll leave the resolution to 3. We still have the nice curve, but then the wireframe is a bit cleaner. Right, so next, instead of 2D, let's move it over to 3D like this, because we at the end we just want the outline, and then we'll be able to convert it into curve. So once we leave it to 3D, that's it. Let me go back here. Right, you can see it's hollow, there's nothing inside. That's fine. So select this, right click, and then let's do convert to mesh. Right, so now this is not a curve anymore, but then it's converted into a mesh. Now let's fill it up. So with this selected, let's hit on tab to go into edit mode. And then you can see these are the points that were created for us. So let's hit on A to select everything, and then hit on F to fill it up. Right, so now we have filled the main one up. Let's create, so you see these marking lines, these are the places that we are going to fold. So let's create the geometry let's work with the geometry so that it will be easier for us to fold, right? So to do that, we have to join some geometries here and there, and then delete some of them. It's very difficult for you to see, but you see we have a point here and then a point here, right? So let's join these points together. So I'll select the two, then I'll hit on J to join them together. So we are going to fold this point, keep it in mind. Let's do the same thing here. You see we have a point here, hold shift and then drag and select this point, hit on J to join them together. I'll do the same thing here, select these 2 points, so this one and then this one, hold shift, hit on J to join them, and then we'll do the same thing at the bottom. So I'll select these 2 points, J for join, and then I'll select these 2 points here, J for join, and then lastly we come here, select these 2 points here, then J for join, and then we are going to fold this part and then this part as well. So we have 1 point here and then 1 point here, but then if you see, it's not properly aligned to this point, right? So this is the joint that we want to fold. So let's try and bring this point right to this point, right? So to do that, we have to turn on our snapping. So I'll come to my snapping and then I'll set it to vertex, right? And then I'll turn it on, set it to vertex, and then I'll click on this magnet to turn it on. So once I turn it on, I'll select this point, double tap on G twice, and then I'll drag to bring it here, and then once I click, it's going to snap directly to this side. So once it does that, I'll select the 2, then I'll join them together with my J. I'll do the same thing here, select this, tap on G twice, and then I'll snap it to this point here, and then you see it snaps directly to this point. I'll select both and then hit on J to join them to create this edge, right? So this is the edge that we want. I think there's an extra edge point here that we don't want, so we hit on X and then we dissolve vertex, then we select this X for dissolve vertex, just to dissolve these vertices, and then our object is ready for us to fold, right? So just like that. Before we fold, I think we have to create these lines in the middle, right? So to create these ones in the middle, first we can select this point here, then hold shift to select this point at the top, and then hit on J to join them. So we join them right at the middle, and then once we join these, we can do Ctrl+R to add in a loop cut in the middle, right? So it's supposed to work. I don't know why it's not working. Let me select this. Okay, select this. Okay, fine. Let's join these 2 before. So let's go to our point select mode, drag to select this point and then this point here, and then hit on J to join them, select this point and then this point here, J to join them, right? Select this point and then this point and then J to join them as well, right? And then we can do the same thing here, J for join, and then once we are done with that, we can create this line here, which are the places that we are going to fold. So we can do Ctrl+R, adding a loop cut right at the middle, and then we are going to bevel this loop cut. So Ctrl+B for bevel, to bevel this loop cut too, like this, and then we can scale it outside until it's aligning on this line to create these 2 lines, right? So once we are done, our object is ready, our curve is ready, so we can rename this to box, and then we can select everything else and then M, and then we add it to new collections, and then we can rename it to reference, create, then we can hide our reference to hide these lines. We are not going to need them anymore. So now we are done with our basic geometry. Let's move on to folding it and then using it to form a box. So for the fold, before we start folding, first let's do some selection and then save them so that it will be easier for us to select them later on, right? So first, make sure we have our face select mode active. I'll drag up to this side, right? So I'll drag from here to here to here, and then select these faces, and then I'll hit on plus, and then I'll rename it to face 1 just for easy identification. So we are just going to save it. Each part is going to be, so once we have this phase 1, I'll hit on assign to assign the selected faces to this group, right? So next I'll select, double click, I'll click on plus to add in a new, double click, and then hit on create a phase 2, right? And then I'll select this, just this face here in the middle, then I'll hit on assign to assign it to this phase 2. I'll click on plus to create phase 3, and then I'll select this face, this face, and then this one, and then I'll hit on assign to assign them to this this face, and then lastly click and then double click, select phase 3, phase 4, and then we select this, hold control, and then click here to select all of these faces, and then hit on assign to assign it to this vertex group. So we can easily select this, select, and then it will select these ones for us. It's saved, so we have saved all our selections. Maybe we want to select this face and this face, we can select this, and then select, and then it has select, and then it will select the face for us nicely like that. Or we can deselect, and everything will be deselected for us nicely. So now let's start with our folding. So the folding is going to be very simple. First, let's go to our edge select mode, select this edge here, and then we are going to move our 3D cursor right at this place, right? So we're going to move our 3D cursor right at this edge, and then we're going to start with our folding, right? But before we do that, let's tab out of edit mode, and then let's make sure this, the point of origin, so you see this yellow orange thing, let's make sure it's set at a proper place. So with this selected, we go to object, set origin, and then geometry to origin, just to move this into place, right? Let's tab into edit mode, and then now we can start. So we are going to move our 3D cursor to this side, and then we are going to rotate, setting the pivot points to our 3D cursor, so that we'll be able to rotate this half in 90 degrees, and then we'll be able to rotate the other half. So let me do it, and then it will make sense. So with this line selected, if you remember, this is where we are going to fold. So this line, this one, and this line, and then this line, right? So just keep it in mind. So with this line selected, this is going to be our first fold. Let's hit on shift plus S. So with shift plus S, and then we use our mouse wheel and bring it to, we select cursor to selected. Now the cursor will move right to this place, right? So once the cursor moves right to this place, we can come to our pivot, transform pivot point, and then we can set it to 3D cursor. Now the transform pivot point is set to the 3D cursor. So once we do that, we can easily come to our faces. You know, this whole selection is the face 1, so we can hit on assign. We can hit on select to select this face, right? So we are selecting this entire face, or you can just drag, click and drag. Make sure you are on face select mode, click and drag to select this face. Just make sure you select all these faces, right? So once this face is selected, we can hit on R, Z on the Z axis, and then we can rotate it 90 degrees, minus 90 degrees on the Z axis. So I'm folding it on this side like this, right? So this is our first fold, and then we are going to do the rest for these ones as well. So let's go back with our edge select mode, select this edge, shift S, cursor to selected, and then we can select these two faces here. So you can just click and drag to select these two faces. Make sure you have your face select mode active, select all of them, or you can just come to the faces that we created. We select this, hit on select, and then phase 4, select to select these two faces, whichever way works. And the easiest way, just go with the easiest way, or the way that makes sense for you. So another thing to do is, since we are going to do a lot of rotation, we can turn on our rotate tool, and then you can see our pivot point is set to the 3D cursor. Then we can rotate it like this. Holding Control will give you precision, so we want 90 degrees rotation like this, right? So we have rotated it 90 degrees. And then finally, the last one, we select edge select mode, select this edge, so not this one but this edge, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then we can select this entire faces, which is the face 4, select to select it, and then we can rotate it once again 90 degrees nicely like this, right, to create this face here. Okay, so once we do that, the next is to fill the top and then the bottom. So we're going to use the same process. Edge select mode, select this edge, Shift S, and then cursor to selected, and then we rotate it. And then once we do cursor to selected, face select mode, select this face, rotate it a little bit inside. So we are going above 90 degrees, so a little bit inside, not the exact 90 degrees. Select this edge, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then hit on 3 or face select mode, select this face, and then let's rotate this inside a little bit, right? So we can do the same thing here. Select edge select this edge, Shift S, cursor to selected, select this edge, and then let's rotate it. Let's rotate it like this for it to enter. So once we are here, we can do Control plus R and then add in some loop cuts here, right? And then once we add in the loop cut, we are going to use it to add a little bit of deformation and distortion later on. So with this, we can just go back to our face select mode, select this face here, hold Control, click, and then hold Control to click to select all these faces, and then we can rotate it again. I'll hold Control to get some precision, so I'll rotate it 90 degrees, exactly at 90 degrees, and then we have this, right? So now let's try and add in some detail using our proportional editing tool. All right, so to do that, first let's just select one edge like this, right? And then let's make sure we change this from our 3D cursor right to the bounding box, and then we can hit on M for move to move it, right? You see now it's moving only this vertex. So let's turn on our proportional editing. Then let's change it to sphere or smooth works, right? So with this selected, I can hit on G, then you can see this big circle. So if you scroll your mouse wheel, this is the area of influence, right? So we can scroll our mouse wheel up or down to reduce the area of influence. So now I can bring it down, but if you take a look, you can see it's affecting our box as well, which is something we don't want, right? So first, before we do that, let's hide the rest of the box, remaining only this part that we want to deform, right? So to hide the rest of the box, what we are going to do is to select the faces, Shift click to select these faces at the bottom, and then hit on Control plus I to invert the selection, and then we can hit on H to hide, right? So we've hidden the rest of the selection, which only the bottom part remaining. So now we can easily select this. Maybe we can go to our left orthographic view by clicking on this X here, and then hit on G, maybe decrease the influence a little bit, and then we can bring this down a little bit down like this without affecting the rest. And then once we are done, we can hit on Alt plus H to bring out the rest, right? So if you take a look at our box, you can see we have a slight overlapping here, which is nice and beautiful, right? So now our box is basically done. Next, what's left for us? Maybe let's rotate this. Let's rotate this part here. So let's go to our edge select mode, select this edge, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then we can go back to our face select mode, select this face, and then rotate this. Let's make sure we have this turned off, and then we can rotate with this turned off, and then let's make sure this is set to the 3D cursor. And then we can easily rotate this 90 degrees like this, right? So depending on the style you want to go with, whether you want a closed box or you want an open box, it's entirely up to you. But before we go forward, let's just unwrap this and then add in our nice material, and then maybe we can see how we can compose and render this later on. If you enjoyed this video up till now, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot, liking and sharing the video. Let's move on. So once we are here, next, before we add in our label, our nice design, let's unwrap this object, right? Nice and beautiful. So before we unwrap it, let's add in some thickness and then add in some bevel. Let's add in some bevel and thickness, right? So with this selected, you can hit on, go back to our modifiers tab, add modifier, and then let's add in a bevel modifier, right? So the bevel is added. So you can see we have a bevel here and then a bevel here, and then on some other places as well. So let's increase the bevel to 3, and then let's decrease the amounts. We need only a small amount of bevel. Yeah, maybe 0.1 is fine. And then next, let's add in some solidify to add in some thickness. So I'll go to add modifier, generate, and then solidify modifier. Then we go into the negative. So let's just drag this, add in some thickness on the inside. Thickness is too huge, so let's hit on tab to jump into edit, out of edit mode, shift A, control A, and then let's apply our scale so that our thickness will be applied nicely, as well as our bevel, right? So once we applied our scale, we can see we can go back. We can now add in the thickness nicely like this, right about here is fine. So 0.06, and then let's check even thickness to make sure everything is evenly added nicely, and then we can increase our bevel, something like this. All right, yeah, I think everything is looking nice, beautiful. Maybe decrease the thickness a bit. Maybe 0.3. Yeah, I think 0.3 is fine. Nicely like this, right? So next, if you want, you can leave it opened or closed, but before we jump into that, let's add in our materials, right? So we can go to our UV, select everything, U for UV unwrap, and then let's unwrap it with the default one, which is the angle based. Then it's going to be unwrapped for us like this. Yeah, so after we've unwrapped our UV, we can now go back to our layout, and then we add in a new material. So let's turn on the look dev mode so that we can see what we are doing. So let's add in a new material. We'll bring this up. So with this selected, I'll hit on Ctrl+T to add in an image texture with mapping and then texture coordinate. And then in the image texture, I hit on open. And then we are going to go into our project file, and then we are going to select our label. So the label, we have two. We have one for the main color and then another one for the text and other cool stuff. So we come to this very shortly. So let's select the first one, which is this label, then hit on open to open image, right? You can see our label is applied, but then it's applied in a very weird way. So let's go to our shader our UV editing tab, and then let's try and fix this. Now before we go to our UV editing tab, Just keep this in mind. So this is our front. So this is going to be the front facing. And then let's go back to the UV editing tab. So now once we are in the UV editing tab, we can change this to look depth so that we can see what we are doing here as well. So we have this. You can see the for our UV is looking the other way. So let's select with everything selected. Let's right click, and then we can do mirror X to flip our UV so that our UV will face the right way. So once we mirror X, we can just hit on G, and then we can position this in place nicely like this, right? And then everything will be positioned nicely in place. In case you were wondering how I got the UV to be this perfect, what I usually do is once I UV unwrap this, right? So let's say this image is not there. Once I UV unwrap, I go to image, UV, and then export my UVs, and then I'll use these UVs to create my label, right? So if I jump you into Photoshop, you can see this is the label, but I can turn on the UV. So this is the UV that I used to create the label, right? Nice. So once we have this, we have two labels. So this is the first one. Let's go back to our layout and see that everything is nicely unwrapped. So once the first one is unwrapped, let's add in the one that comes with the name of the product and other cool details. So to add that one, we are going to mix this shader. So with this shader selected, let's do Shift D to create a duplicate. Then let's do Shift A, search, and then we can search for shader, mix shader, right? So let's select our mix shader. Then let's put it right in the middle like this. And then let's plug this one at the bottom, right? So once we have this, we are going to add in our extra label. So let's select these two. Let's select these ones. Then Shift D to create a duplicate. And then we are going to use the alpha as the factor of our mesh shader, right? Then we are going to select this, and then we're going to select the second label, and then you can see it will start coming. So let me quickly take you to my Photoshop and then show you. So this is the second label. This is what we have onto it. So I separated the two and then saved them as two separate files, right? So I hide this one and then save this as one file. And then I turn this on and then hide everything else and then save this as a separate file. And then I'll use this as the mask inside Blender, if that makes sense. So this is the second one, which has this, right? So it's just black and white, and then so it's been used as a mask for this shader, right? So everything that we apply to this shader will be applied to only the masked area. So let's say we want to change the color a little bit, we can do that here, and then we'll apply to this shader because we have this mask on. So let's make it metallic. Let's decrease the roughness a little bit so that it's very shiny like this. So you can go with, if you want a foil, you can go with a gold color like this, and then you get your nice foil or whatever. But I'll go with something a little bit subtle like this so that we have it here. And then next we add a bump node. So I'll bring this forward. I'll do Shift A, search for bump, vector bump, and then I'll add my bump node here. I'm going to plug the normal into the normal, and then we are going to use the same image. So this image, we are going to plug the alpha into the height, right? So you can see we start having some bumps here, which is very nice and beautiful. And then we have the bumps on the flowers as well, right? Very beautiful. So this is exactly what we are looking for. So the next thing we can do is to add in some noise gesture just to give it this paper feel. So I'll scroll up here, principal BSDF shader, Shift A, and then search for noise texture. Adding the noise texture here. Let's select this bump, Shift D to duplicate, and then I'll plug the normal into the normal, and then the factor into the height. It's compiling. Yeah, and then this is what we have. I'll select this noise texture, then Control plus T to add in a vector mapping. Now set it to UV since we've already unwrapped our file, so that this is what we have. Now let's add in a hue scale like 300 to make the scale very small, and then we can make the lacronality to 3 like this, increase the detail to 15, and then we can decrease the strength and distance to, let's say, 0.1. You can still add in more scale, 500, right, so that we have this nice paper texture. We can still decrease the strength if it's too hard, so it just have to be there but not too intruding, right? Yeah, so that's it. Basically that's it for our box. It's looking nice and beautiful. Next, let's see how we can do a final render, and everything is cool. So to do a final render, I'm going to close the box and then I'll do my render. But in case you want to leave your box open, let's go to a solid shading. No, let's go here. In case you want to leave your box open, you see we have one problem. The inside, everything is showing, the text and everything is showing, and then maybe that's not what we want. So how are we going to solve that? So now, in case you want to leave your box open, it means you have to select this and then apply your solidify, right? So with this selected, I'll do solidify and then apply it, right? So that's now we have, can jump into edit mode. You have a solid, you have a solid object both in the front and then the back. And then what you can do is to select this, all the inside parts, all the inner parts that are showing. You just select all the inner parts that are showing and then add a new material. So we go to our materials. Where's some material? Go to our materials, hit on plus to add in a new material, add new, and then just white, and then hit on assign to assign it, right? So we have this white material assigned to only the inside part. Can select this material, assign, and then we can hold on alt click to select all the outer part material, and then hit on assign to assign the material, right? As easy and simple like that, right? Yeah, but that's in case you want to leave your box open. So I'm not going to do that. I want mine closed, so I'll just do Ctrl Z to move back a couple of times until we have this, until we have our solidify not applied. I'll move back a couple of times, yeah, until our solidify is not applied, and then I'm going to fold. Since we are not going to see the inside, so I'm not going to worry about it. I will just fold it, right? So let's fold these two parts. Go to back to edit mode, select this edge here, shift S, get that to selected, and then 3 to select this face, and then I can rotate it on the 90 degrees. Select this, shift S, get that to selected, 3, select this, and then I can rotate this. Just make sure you rotate it a little bit inside. Shift S, get that selected, select this face, and then move it inside, right? So that we have a little bit inside, and then we can rotate this one as well. So for this one, we are going to add in the same detail we added at the bottom. So the same drill, Ctrl R to add in some loop cuts here. So once we have the loop cuts added, let me just save my file just in case. So once we have the loop cuts added, we are going to select everything. We are going to select this line, shift S, get that to selected, and then make sure we have our face select mode active. Hold Control, click here, hold Control, and then click here to select this entire loop. And then we can rotate it like this. 90 degrees. Right, so this is moving out. It means we have to rotate it inside inwards a little bit. So let's select this line here, and then we can do Shift S, get out to select it. Right, and then face select mode, make sure we have this face selected, and then we can rotate it inside a little bit like that. Right, so the next thing we have to do is to select this, control click, select this entire thing, then control I to invert the selection, and then H to hide it from our scene. Once it's hidden, you can select this, make sure this is set to bounding box, then let's turn on our proportional editing, and then we are going to hit on G, Z to bring it up a little bit. A little bit like this, right? So that is a little bit up. And then next, you can hit on Tab, Alt. You can hit on Alt H to unhide, and then Tab to go back into our solid shading mode. And then this is what we have, right? Nice. So our box is ready. Everything's ready. We can go ahead and do our final render. So to do the render, as usual, let's just drag to bring this out on the side for the setup, and then we can select this object. Let's just do set origin to geometry to origin, just to bring it back in the center. Then we can set up our camera. So for this, let's go with 1080 by 1350, just a portrait Instagram size. You can lock our camera in place, scroll our mouse wheel up, then we can change this to cycles GPU compute, and then turn this GPU on, right, so that we can see what we did. Next, I'm going to plug in an HDRI. So I'll change this from object to world, and then I'll select my background, Control plus T, open, and then I'll locate where I saved my HDRI. You can get some online, so select any one of them, then plug it inside to see the beautiful thing you have done, right? So in case we can swap HDRIs, just find another one just to see how the reflections and everything works. I think this is beautiful and perfect for what we want to do. So next, we can go to our film transparent just to hide the HDRI from our scene. And then we can set up our scene, right? So to set up our scene is going to be very simple. One, let's do Shift A to add in a mesh. And then let's bring the mesh down. Then let's scale the mesh up very big, like this. Then let's do something a little bit more fun. Why not? So let's create a duplicate of these boxes, and then let's add in some rigid body. Let's play with some rigid body and see whether we can come up with some cool results. So with this selected, I'll go to my modifiers tab. Let's just add in some array modifiers to create a duplicate. So I'll create like 3 duplicates. At this point, it's really up to you. Just have some fun with it. Create like 7 duplicates, and then I'll duplicate my array. Then I'll create duplicate on a different axis, so 1.3, right, so that we have some more boxes. Maybe I'll decrease the count a little bit, too much. Then I'll add in another duplicate of an array, and then let's set this on the Y 1.4 just to create this. Why too much? So let's leave it to, let's say 3, like this, right? So with all these arrays, let me just turn this off here. With all these arrays that we've created, let's make them individual objects. So I'll have to apply all my arrays. So I'll select this array, hit on apply, and then apply to apply all of the arrays. And then, so this is just one object. Let's tab into edit mode. I'll just go to my selection mode. So with everything selected, hit on P for separate, and then we can separate by loose parts, right? So now all of these objects are individual objects. Now once we're done, we hit on tab to jump out of edit mode, but all of them have their point of origin here, which is something we don't want. So let's reset all of their point of origin. So let's go to object, set origin to geometry, so that all of them have their point of origin at the middle. Once we are done with that, we can do one more step to optimize our scene a little bit. So let's do Ctrl+L to link, and then we can link the object data properties, so all of them share the same data, so that Blender doesn't have to calculate each and every single data as separate data. So all of them share the same data now. So once we do that, we can select this one object, and then we can add in our rigid body. So go to object, rigid body, and then add active, right? So we can go to our physics properties, then we can see active is being applied, and then let's change the shape to box, right? So you can see this is the shape. Let me just change it to something else. You can see we have this is not what we have. So luckily we are creating a box, so let's just change the shape to box, right? So once we change the shape to box, with this selected, I'll click and drag to select everything again. Make sure this is the active one. Go to object, and then we go to rigid body, and then we can do copy from active, so that all of the rest of the cubes will copy from this active box. So let's click on copy from active, and all of them, the rigid body settings that we did for this will be applied to all of them. So once you're done, you can select this, select the plane at the bottom, and then we add another rigid body, and then we change it from active to passive, right? So once we do that, everything is all set. Let me just quickly drag this here, then change this to my timeline, and then we can hit on play to see what we have, right? So play with this, and then you can come up with some interesting renders. So you see we have something like this. Just hit on play. So wherever you pause, you can see we have some interesting renders you can come up with. So let me just turn my, you see we have some nice interesting renders you can come up with to display your product. But let's make it more interesting. So I'm going to select these ones here, G, to bring them up, and then I'll intentionally rotate them to create some more chaos. Then go back, and then let's hit on play. Right. So if this is the render you want to come up with, this is nice. Or if you want more chaos, you can even select these ones at the middle, and then rotate them again. Just make sure they are not clipping into each other, and then let's hit on play. Yeah, you can see. So you can come up with some interesting compositions. Just take your time and then play with it. So I'm just going to add in a backdrop at the back. So let me just position my this thing here. Now let's go to our camera settings, but before we do that, let's just add in some backdrop. So I'll go to frame 0, doesn't really matter. I'll select this, Shift D to create a duplicate, and then I'll rotate it on the X-axis 90 just to create a backdrop, and then G to bring it in place, and then S to scale it out like this, so that it creates this nice backdrop. Then let's hit on play once again. So you can keep playing with it till you find something that works for you. Yeah, so after a little bit more of experimentation, this was what I came up with. So I added another layer at the bottom, and then I just moved this up here and there. So just play with it till you find what works best for you. So I hit on play, and then this was my final render, you can still position your camera till you get your desired result. You can select our camera, maybe increase the focal length to 90, just to make everything a little bit bolder, like this. And then we can add in some lighting here and there, just to add in some lights and shadows, or yet still we can play with different HDRI to come up with different results, right? So just download a couple of the HDRIs. They are free at HDRI Haven. They are free to use, so just download a couple of them and then use them for your experiments, right? Yeah, so I think this looks very nice for me. Lastly, all we have to do is to go to our render properties. I've set my samples to 100, but if you want your final render, you can set it to 1000. I'll set mine to 100, and then I'll go to my color management. I'll change my view transform to this. This looks cool. Whatever looks cool for you, or filmic, just try and then see. This is a bit more natural, but this gives it a more like popping feel. So I'll go with the AGX. And then the look, maybe we can take it to high contrast to get more contrasting color. Then you can add in some lights. So I'll add in an area light to this side. Just rotate it on the Y axis like this. Make it bigger. Just point it here, and then increase the power of the light to, let's say, 1000. Right. Maybe you can bring it to this. Just, yeah. Increase the power of the light. Play with it, and then finally we can add in a little bit depth of field. So go to our camera, select our camera object, depth of field, select the depth of field, and then focus on object. We select the object we want to focus on. Then we can decrease the f-stop so that we have some blurriness on the background and then the foreground, and then the object will be able to stand out nicely. So once you're done and everything is okay, we can go to render, and then we can render our final image. If you loved this video, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. It helps me to bring up more and more and more of these cool and awesome videos. It's my friend once again. See you on the next one. Peace out.